Welcome to Liberate Your People Pleaser. I am your host, Brenda Florida, certified life coach, and you might be a people pleaser if you sacrifice your needs or your wants or your feelings to benefit someone else, or you keep silent when something bothers you or upsets you, or you're super critical and feel like you're probably your own worst enemy. Well, here's what I've got in store for you for this podcast. First of all, there's nothing wrong with you and you don't need fixing. What we need to do is leverage the superpowers of being a people pleaser, because there are definite superpowers. You are super intuitive, I am sure. You have great powers of empathy, the ability to read a situation and know what's going on with people and those around you. So what we're going to do in each episode is talk about ways to disempower the parts of it that are diminishing and don't serve us anymore, and level up or empower all those superpowers. So join me in the next episode of Liberate Your People Pleaser. All right, today we're going to talk about something that happens to all of us people pleasers, and that is trying to be someone you're really not so that you can fit in or please someone or just fulfill, a role, I'll say, that you believe you're supposed to fulfill. Like for me, it was the good Christian wife, or, the good little girl, or the good girl as a woman. I was always the peacemaker. I was always creating harmony. I went and did, sort of all the hard jobs, so to speak. Like even when my parents were getting divorced and I was 14, and my dad left my mother for a younger woman. And so, of course, she's very angry, and it was a very ugly divorce. And my mom would actually have me talk to my dad when he would call, because they were arguing about child support or, whatever was happening. She'd hand me the phone so I could have the difficult conversation with my dad. And I did that. Right? So you probably do this in all sorts of ways. You probably do it at work, once we're adults, romantic relationships and work relationships are where we tend to bring a lot of those people pleasing habits with us. It also happens a lot, or it can, with our children. So for those of you who are parents, think about this in your relationship to your own children, no matter what age they are, and see how you may be passing these same qualities to them of wanting them to be who you want them to be. Okay, so when it comes to our own children, then we flip it. And while we're both also trying to be the mom we think we should be, we're wanting our children unconsciously, we're not usually thinking this out loud. Okay. You don't wake up and say, I have to be the mother that, culture or my church or, some idea somebody put in my head of me has to be today. And I'm going to make my children be who I want them to be. Of course not. We don't think of it that way, right? But it's what happens because it's the unconscious pattern. And the unconscious pattern for this and everything else is so much more powerful than a thought or an idea to do it differently. Until that thought or idea to do it differently becomes so repeated, it becomes the habit, the new habit, that then that takes, goes down into our unconscious or subconscious, and that becomes the pattern. But these things are really like, a deep rut in a road. And so the original unconscious patterns that we were raised with, to be that peacemaker, to be the good girl, the good boy, the strong one, the accomplished one, right? The hero of the family, the clown of the family, right? The one that makes everybody laugh, like all these roles get assigned to us, so to speak, and they become like a deep, deep rut in a road. And so our work as adults is to get out of that rut. Well, even if you think about a car, right, on a dirt road, if, you know, hopefully all of you have experienced that in some way or another. I spent my teenage years in the mountains of Colorado, so I know a lot about ruts and roads. And it's hard to get the car out of there. Like, you really have to make it go. You can't just, you know, ease out of a rut. It's like a, you know, it's like you got to jerk the steering wheel, because, and the deeper it goes, the more you have to do that to compensate and get yourself out of the rut. Well, then if we stay with the driving analogy, this isn't perfect, but it works pretty well. If we're running alongside of that rut, it's going to be easy for the car to slip back into it. So that's kind of like the middle phase of when you're starting to become aware of these things, and you're starting to have the ideas and the thoughts that you don't want to keep continuing with these habits, you know, that kind of thing. But it's easy to slip back in. So a boss confronts you at work, or your business partner, or something happens in your family or with your spouse or your lover or whatever, and boom, you slide back into that rut, and there you go, you know, being the good girl, or being the one that's always creating harmony, and which is very silencing, right? Those are things that are super silencing. Some people have the role of being the aggressor, being the antagonist, right? Being the rebellious one, whatever. But all of those are roles that you got in that rut of, in that habit of behaving with. And so you'll slide back into that. And I want you to think right now of something really specific. I'm sure there's a specific story or time in your life, or maybe it's happening to you right now, that you can think of when I say these things and give these examples of, oh, yeah, that's when I did that. And then I blew up at my boss. So, you know, I went back to my old pattern, or whatever it is. So then there is creating, in essence, a new rut. This is a good rut, though, of changing your thoughts, changing your feelings, changing your actions to the degree that behaving in a way that really owns your authenticity becomes the new rut, right? In which case, a rut is a very good thing, because that's what we want to be in. We want to be in integrity with our authentic nature as much of the time as possible. So it doesn't mean something won't pull us to go back to that old rut, right? Because that's what life, you know, life is that way. No, you know, until we're enlightened masters, we're going to get triggered. We're going to have, you know, that fight that we always have with our spouse or our lover. We're going to have the button that our mother or father can always push. We're going to have the thing that happens at work that is the most likely to draw us back into that original rut of people pleasing, however you know, tend to express that. But the more we have another rut to go to, the easier it is to go, oh, look, I came over here, or I went down that street. Maybe we'll stop with the rut analogy there. I went down that street, and I don't want to be on that street. I want to get over here to my new street. And we take ourselves over there, just like we drive a car, right? And we get back in that mindset. We get back in the alignment with our authentic nature, who is able to speak her truth. And even that's kind of a two-step process along the way in the journey. Part of it is to go from being who we think someone else wants us to be, whether that's a single person or a collection of people, right? Like, so for me, it was also the church. I wanted to be this, you know, good Christian person, girl, you know, teenager, wife, all the things, mother, you know, all the things. So it could be an organization like that. It could be a family structure. It could be a very specific person, all of the above. We go from realizing, wait a minute, I'm trying to be somebody I'm not, to, okay, so who am I? What, if I wasn't trying to be the person they want me to be, who would I be? And then once we really understand that and get to know her, which is a very inside job, then we start exploring with expressing that out in the world. Okay, so now when this happens, how does this authentic version of me want to respond? So it's kind of a 3-step process, and you can't skip any of them, and they're all gonna, it's not like it's a one and done. And once we figure it out, that never happens again, or we never get triggered into that old rut again, or whatever. It's, a growing process. And so it's not about that destination of now I'm perfect at this. It's about seeing those triggers really quickly, or seeing those places that we are being who we think someone else wants us to be. And sometimes we don't even realize it. I've coached plenty of clients who will explain, something about how they are. Well, I'm just a person who has to, um, you know, do things to make the peace. That's not always exactly how they say it, but that's the point. Like, I'm the person who, mends the relationships in the family, and da 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 da. And it can feel very noble and very much like a calling. And that's just who I am. And as the coach, because I'm not in their habits, I'm not in their rut, I can see that that's not necessarily who they are. It's just that they've been doing it for so long, they think it's who they are. And goodness knows I've done the same thing. I've been on this journey out of people pleasing, or codependency, as we could also call it, for, almost, 25 years, solid 25. So there were plenty of things that I thought were just the way I was. This is me. This is who I am. I'm being authentic. And they weren't. They were just so conditioned into me. I didn't know another way to be. So another way that this happens, that I want to start bringing forth in our podcasts and conversations and Instagram and the Facebook group and everything, is the truth that the other arena this happens in, that affects not just people pleasers, is with any group of people, any person who has been in a disadvantaged, role historically, culturally. So any Black person of color, indigenous person, LGBTQ plus, all of that community, most of the people in that community, of which my only thing is I'm a woman. So because obviously I'm white and I'm a heterosexual woman. So the only place I've really experienced like that big cultural, the patriarchy and the effects of white privilege and all of that, is by being a woman, because it's certainly in there's still plenty of evidence to support that, even white women are still not equal to men. And so I've experienced it some in that, who I'm supposed to be as a woman, right? So I'm supposed to want to have children. I'm supposed to want to cook and care for the family and da 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 da, right? Not have a career. I never, ever thought I would have a career, let alone be the breadwinner for my family, because that's not what women did. That's not what Christian women did in my world. Okay. All the worlds have their own little, agendas for what we're supposed to be in these roles. But I really want to explore what connects all of us, whether you're in the LGBTQ plus community, or in, the Black, indigenous, people of color communities, to have this conversation, because I can only imagine the degree to which you have also spent part of your life pretending to be somebody you're not. We can see this. I loved the show that Octavia Spencer did. The name of the program has just escaped me. It's on Netflix, where she is a Black woman who developed her own hair care products, and one of was the first Black woman millionaire. And it's a great story, but part of what you see is that they're developing hair products so that Black women can have hair that looks like white women, right? And we see this in so many cultures where the differences in the color of, how much melanin you have in your skin. Are you super dark, medium dark, chocolate brown, light brown, like whatever, where somehow, because of patriarchy and white privilege, this idea of the more we can be, like a white man. I think we see it even in feminism, where so many of the early years of feminism were really about women becoming more like men, right? Women becoming more connected to our masculine nature. And I don't even really like to use that word, but I haven't figured out a good replacement. But, there are these archetypal feminine and masculine, energies, where the masculine is the out in the world getting things done, and the feminine is receptive and nurturing. And we all have both of those qualities within us, regardless of our gender or sexual expression or any of it. But there's been such a pull towards, as if the right way is to be, in essence, more like a white man. So for any white men watching this, I'm not trying to demonize you either. If you're watching this, I applaud you for your self-awareness and, your willingness to grow. I have lots of really wonderful white men in my life, but we can't, say it isn't true that has been what for centuries has been sort of the gold standard, so to speak, or the what things are measured against. So I really want to open up this dialogue. It's scary for me, sure, because I'm afraid, I'll say something that will inadvertently be just like, hopefully not completely inappropriate, but maybe lacking sensitivity for any of my fellow listeners, brothers and sisters in the world, in that, any of those other groups that I'm not a part of. So, forgive me now if I do that. But I think it's more important to have the conversation, because I want to hear the stories for people who are, Black, indigenous, of color, in the LGBTQ community, because this is, I think, part of what will connect us. Because why all of those underserved, underacknowledged, and usually abused groups, yes, need their time to stand for what they are in that, right? A person of color, an indigenous person, being gay, being queer, transgender, whatever. Because when you've been so denied, you really need to be seen, for what you are, and be able to declare that, right? And kind of like hold up that sign and have that be okay. So totally love that. Totally get that. And I also want us all to find that place where we totally connect. So your story of how you tried to be somebody you weren't, and then realizing who you are, or maybe you were lucky enough to always know who you were and you always knew you were pretending to be somebody else. That's not my story. I did not know who I was. Got completely lost, and that happens to a lot of people. But regardless, we get from that trying to be somebody we aren't to knowing who we are, and then having the courage to express that out in the world. And I really want my world, my audience, to include this conversation in a really open and transparent way. So this is an open call for guests. If you want to be a guest and us and come on the podcast and come into this conversation, and you're a person of color or indigenous or Black or in the LGBTQ plus community, or some other story that because we all have them, that make us connect to that you would like to share, please reach out to me and tell me that, and why you think it would be a benefit to our listeners here. So I'll put it in the show notes. You can email me at brenda@brendaflorida.com and let me know, what your story is, and how we can bring this conversation out so that we can heal these wounds. These are deep wounds that are generational, they're ancestral, and they're not going to go away in a minute, right? But they will go away after minutes and minutes and minutes and minutes of healing can occur and compound on each other. And it's the only way I know to really create the kind of world that I want to see. So I can't wait to hear from you. I can't wait to hear, DM me, tell me how this resonates with you. Feel free to share with me how you've pretended and your journey out, or maybe you're stuck there, and that's fine too. That's what I help people with all day, every day, is getting out of who they think they're supposed to be and into their authentic nature, and then being able to express that out in the world. I love you guys. Mwah. All right. Thank you for joining me for this episode of Liberate Your People Pleaser. Hey, I've got 3 more things for you. One is join my private Facebook group, Liberate Your People Pleaser. We have lots of great conversations. I do Facebook Lives in there, drop in free resources, all kinds of cool things to support you in your journey to liberate your people pleaser. So the link for that is in the show notes. Second, I would love it if you would put a 5-star review on whatever podcast service that you found the podcast on. That would be totally awesome. And I'll give you a shout out on a future episode. And last but not least, if you've got a question you would like for me to answer or address, you'll also find a link in the show notes to do that. So submit your question and you'll hear me talk about it on a future episode of Liberate Your People Pleaser. I'll see you in the next episode, everyone. Bye-bye.